So there's an ongoing debate in Call of Duty specifically, but first-person shooters in general, and that is the debate between controller and mouse and keyboard, specifically with aim assist. When we talk about Call of Duty, when we talk about aim assist, when we talk about controllers, what we're really a lot of times getting into is whether or not the controller, the inputs are balanced. The reality is the inputs are not balanced. They're not balanceable, right? They will never be the same. They both have different strengths and different weaknesses. When it comes to aiming, really the best input is mouse and keyboard. Now I say that having over 30 years of experience playing first-person shooters with mouse and key. At the same time, there's a lot of benefits to playing on controller. Aside from it being more comfortable and a little bit easier to use, it's easier to drive vehicles. It's easier to handle certain functions, being slow, being more accurate with how you walk. These things can be very beneficial to play on controller. However, when it comes to aiming, not so much. Again, I've got experience on that too, because I've played mouse and keyboard in first-person shooters for the last 27 years, ever since GoldenEye came out for the N64. So when it comes to playing games on both inputs, I've been there and I've done that. So when we look at the question of whether or not A, does aim assist belong in games, and B, is it overpowered? The answer is actually yes and yes. Hold on. Everyone who didn't just tune out and leave an angry note in the comments, or a positive one, if you decide to. What do I mean by it is not only required, but it's overpowered? Well, here's the thing. When you look at how controllers work versus how mouse and key works for aiming, we're going to talk aiming specifically in first-person shooter games. When you look at how aiming works, right? You have to take your crosshair and you have to move it around the screen, and you have to turn around and you have to find the enemy and you have to shoot the enemy, right? And you have to be able to track the enemy as they move. On controller, you do that by moving the thumbstick, and you move the thumbstick, you can see it only goes so far in any given direction. And that movement translates onto the screen through what we call sensitivity. So the higher the sensitivity, the faster the movement. And so, but on controller, you have that sensitivity is a maximum speed, right? So a sensitivity of 20 would be the maximum speed, would just set a consistent rotation that you have on your controller. That's how fast you can spin it. You cannot go any faster than that. The problem with a fast speed is while you can rotate quickly, you a lot of times can't stop fast enough. You can't see what you're doing fast enough. And so you are unable to stay on target and shoot your targets. A slow speed, however, is often, can be very accurate, right? You can be very precise as you slowly move to your target. However, if your target's moving, the odds that you were able to stay on target and actually catch up to your target is very low, right? Unless the target is standing perfectly still, not looking at you, they're going to just walk to the side and you won't be able to target them. So most people find a happy medium. A lot of, very popular in Call of Duty with the speed of 7, right? As 7 sensitivity, very common. It provides that good balance of fast enough to rotate and get to your target, but slow enough that you have control over it. However, in Call of Duty specifically, that's not, that creates the problem of how do you rotate with a player? How do you stay on target? When you look at how the thumbsticks work, right? You have a couple of different things going on that control aiming, right? So you have your human response. How long does it take for you as a person to react to what you see on screen? Plus, how long it takes you to move the thumbstick from center to its extremity, and then the game actually will calculate, won't just instantly start moving you. It does so gradually, right? So we have what's called an acceleration curve, and there's a couple of different options, and they all do different things. But at the end of the day, it takes you from moving from 0, slowly speeding up to maximum, okay? All of this means being able to turn your character and track a target as it moves across your screen is somewhat limited, and you are definitely limited on how fast that target can be moving and you can stay on top of them. Mouse and key, on the other hand, is a instantaneous one-to-one response to how quickly you move your hand. So if you take your hand and you move it slowly, your character will turn slowly. If you move it quickly, your character will move quickly. All right? And because it's one-to-one, when you move and stop, with enough practice, you can be very good at moving a very specific amount of rotation very, very quickly, and you can have very quick, snappy aim and extremely quick rotation of your character. Something you generally can't get on a controller. So in order to create a balance, right, where both of these can be competitive, because in their raw formats, they're generally not competitive. You can't take a mouse and key and go toe-to-toe on a controller with two relatively equally skilled people and not have the mouse come out on top 75% of the time or more. All right. The mouse is just better. It is more accurate. It is faster. And it is in its raw form, a far superior aiming tool than a controller is. So to compensate for that and to make the game a bit more fun for controller, because it's not as, they're not quite as fun without aim assist. It's harder to hit shots. They get more frustrating. What they do is they create two forms of aim assist. You have slowdown aim assist and you have rotational aim assist. So the slowdown aim assist works if you think about a character model, creates a bubble around that character model. Within the bubble, your sensitivity gets dropped down. And that lets you be more precise on your movements, right? So the same amount of movement of the thumbstick might move the cursor half as much on the screen than it would normally. As a result, you're able to make much finer corrections and have a lot more control over keeping your crosshairs on the target. The other type of aim assist that they have is called rotational aim assist. So the way that rotational aim assist works is that same bubble around your character, right? When your crosshair hits the edge of the bubble, it will follow along and actually somewhat match the speed of the character. The purpose of this is to overcome the physical limitations of the controller, right? You have the delay from going from 0 to extreme. You have the maximum rotational limits of the controller at its extremes. These things make, kind of the close quarters fighting extremely challenging on controller. And for most people, probably not a lot of fun because you just don't hit very much because you just can't keep up with someone who's running around you. So rotational aim assist was created way back decades ago for the purpose of allowing controller players to keep up with movement in close proximity, which is great, right? It's the kind of thing that we want to see in a game where you're not outclassed because of the input device that you're playing. However, in Call of Duty specifically, and most modern first-person shooters, this is true, these two forms of aim assist combine to create almost an aimbot. It's not quite. There's a lot of nuance in that, but it can feel that way. And it creates an effect that I call magnetism. Some people call it sticky aim or stickiness or whatever. Those are kind of sketchy terms, but I call it magnetism. And what it does is that, especially at range, because aim assist wants to follow the center of the aim assist bubble as best as it can, it will actually track that enemy player up, down, left, right, and kind of do those small adjustments for you as the player as you play so that you don't have to make those fine adjustments. The problem with that is that in the hands of someone who's skilled, or at least skilled at not using his thumbstick as much, the game will actually correct a lot of little issues that you have when you play it. And it'll correct it for you. So I want to tuned to a video. This is by a buddy of mine, Hexsmith. And I just want to kind of show off some of the aspects that aim assist does, because I want to talk about how we can make it better for everybody. So in this example, I want to use this example. I want you to watch how the aim assist corrects for the movement of the player at range. You can see how it just kind of follows along and automatically corrects for the little adjustments that that player makes. You can see it here as well. That little rise and fall, right? As the player jumps, the crosshair rises and then follows him back down. That is the rotational aim assist, trying to keep your crosshair at the center of the aim assist bubble. All right. The problem with that is that for skilled players, they have learned and become very good at not using their thumbstick to make those corrections and letting the computer do it for them. Now, a lot of people complain also about the instantaneous response to aim assist. I don't think that you should get rid of that instantaneous response, because at the end of the day, it provides a consistency in how aim assist works, right? We all remember from Caldera when they had problems with aim assist where every little thing disrupted it and fights were just could be haphazard at best because you just lose aim assist randomly. I don't think changing the timing of it is as helpful to players in general as actually changing what the crosshair tries to find. So right now, as I said, it's trying to find the center of the aim assist bubble. And what's in the center of the aim assist bubble? Your character model, right? So it's always trying to stay right about on center. So when you're at range, for example, it will just kind of hang along about the center of the target. So you can fire the gun, make no small corrections, and as the player moves and tries to dodge your bullets, it will just follow along and continue to hit. Now, a lot of people kind of hear this and they think, well, that's great for bad players, right? That actually will help the bad players hit their shots so they have more fun. And then everybody gets to hit more shots, so everybody gets to have more fun. The reality is bad players, unfortunately, don't usually have a good grasp on settings, so their sensitivities are not well paired to their skill level. And B, they're trying to correct with their thumbsticks what they see on the screen, which means a lot of times they are overcorrecting the aim assist bubble itself. They are overshooting their target, right? They're not making the small micro adjustments that the aim assist will make for you. So they end up missing a lot of shots. Or they aren't moving enough and the players are closer. And so as a lower skilled player, as you try to shoot the player, you're not actually correcting enough to keep up with that player, or your sensitivity is not high enough to keep up with that player. And so you get gassed up close. When you aren't learning to use that aim assist, or that make those fine-tuned corrections to stay on target, and aim assist is doing it for you, like most lower skill players, if they get a kill through it, it's by accident more than anything else, right? That's really the biggest difference between a low skill player and a high skill player. They miss so many shots, they overcorrect so often, and they're basically blowing out their aim assist bubble, so they don't actually get to land very many shots. Versus a very, very high skill, top 1% player, they don't need aim assist. They actually will be good enough that they can turn it off and run without it. And a lot of them will actually play on mouse and key, or they did play on mouse and key. And so they're used to making the small corrections. So aim assist for them sometimes is a hindrance. They don't need it to play at an ultra high level. Okay. However, the part of the player base that would really be most impacted by it is probably the average skill and slightly above. And what happens is a lot of players at that skill have learned to use the aim assist to take over for them, right? So the aim assist does the small corrections for them. They've learned and adapted their settings and their sensitivities to really let that happen. which means that they actually perform well above their skill level because aim assist will hit their shots for them. It'll make those small, minute corrections to track the enemy player and let the aim assist bubble do its thing. As a result, because they're doing so much better than they normally would, it makes it much harder for everybody to survive. Because if you're at that skill level, well, then you can compete somewhat against higher skilled players because the computer is impeccable in its aim assist. Higher skilled players will obviously just dominate everybody. The highest skilled players will dominate everybody. But for low skill, for the bottom half or more, maybe the bottom 70% of the player base, you're going to get deleted so much faster because most people are not missing as many shots. And aim assist will give a lot of players those happy little accidents where they would normally miss, but aim assist corrects for them and they're still hitting their shots. So even though if they were to make some changes, I'll talk about what I think the best change that they could make in a minute is. If they make some changes, the lowest skill brackets will probably see no difference in terms of how many kills they get. But what they will see a difference is their survivability. Their ability to evade and to run away from a gunfight that they're losing and survive would go up dramatically. Now, that bracket of players that are better than average, but they're not excellent, and they're playing at an excellent level because the aim assist is helping them so much, would probably be hit the hardest, and they would see a very large reduction in kills in a game because they're not making the small adjustments. They're relying on aim assist. And the highest skill players would see no difference. They would just adjust to it. They would adapt, and they would just continue on. But the vast majority of players who do get deleted from the lobby very quickly would probably live a lot longer and probably ultimately have more fun, even if they hit fewer shots, because to be honest, most of those players only get 1 or 2 kills a game anyways. And so the net negative to them is much less. But how would you do this? I don't think changing the way rotational aim assist follows an aim assist bubble is the right thing. Changing the timing, doing instantaneous response, that sort of thing, that's not it. What you have to do is you have to take your bubble around your character model, and the follow is at the extremities. Okay? It will track in front of a player or it'll track behind a player. And it's up to the player to make the small adjustments to either catch up to the target or pull back to the target or follow the target when it goes back or forth within that bubble. If the last minute adjustments are on the player itself and not being accomplished through aim assist, that stickiness, that magnetism that people are so eager to accomplish by not having to aim as much wouldn't be an issue. We wouldn't see that nearly as much. And so the way it triggers to follow somebody, that instantaneous trigger, that movement, wouldn't be nearly as impactful because you still have to make those fine-tuned adjustments to hit your shots. And I think that's the change we need to push to correct aim assist and kind of bring it more in balance, not just for our mouse and keyboard friends to give them a better experience, but to give the bulk of the player base more survivability, more ability to exist in the game and not get deleted immediately, especially with the TTKs they are right now. The biggest problem we have is that the computer will help you delete somebody without you having to work hard. And that's something we got to fix. And that's something we got to stop. So I know half of you have already disagreed and thrown that in the comment. If you've gotten this far and you agree with me, love to hear it. Either way, subscribe, hit the bell, all of that jazz, and I'll catch you on the next one.